Hello, this is Ray Mota from ACG, and welcome to this edition of The Hot Seat. Joining me today is Pratik from Juniper Networks. Pratik, welcome to The Hot Seat.
Thank you.
And I hope I pronounced your name right. How do you say your complete name, and what's your title with Juniper?
So my full name is Pratik Roychowdhury. I know it's hard to pronounce.
Roychowdhury. Actually, I can do that one.
And I'm the Senior Director and Head of Product Management for Contrail, which is our cloud software and SDN product.
Excellent. Now, one of the things that we see is that there's a lot of discussions about service provider transformation, right? And when we look at the economics, when we look at the operations, the speed it takes, it's just taking them too long and it's too expensive to develop new services, right? And there's a lot of talks about the technology, but not enough talks about the business side. So when we look at this, right, what opportunities do you see for service provider transformation from your point of view?
So you rightly pointed out, service providers are actually going through major transformations, and primarily because of their transition to the cloud.
Right.
And by cloud, I mean whether it is telco cloud, IoT cloud, private cloud, hybrid cloud, public cloud offerings, right?
Right.
So there are mainly three major areas where they are transforming. There is the business, technology, and architecture, and organizational changes.
Right. Yeah.
So on the business front, what is happening is there are new revenue streams that are being created.
Okay.
So there are billions of connected and mobile devices that are running millions of applications on top of it, and so it's not just about delivering of content and applications, and these applications are immersive and interactive, like virtual reality and things of that nature. So it's not just about delivering of those applications, it's more about a lot of last mile optimizations that need to happen, and that in turn results in new revenue streams in the form of new service offerings. So that is one. Now, in order for you to deliver these services, you basically need to have new pricing models. So as a service kind of a pricing models are also coming in, on demand, which needs on demand use of network resources and things like that. And time to market of these applications are very important. So rapid service delivery is important. So those are mainly the business side opportunities.
The business side. Now, I mean, could you elaborate a little bit further on what the key trends from a business transformation is? I mean, what are those key trends that are happening there?
So if you look at the three main areas, like service creation, service delivery, and the pricing models.
And the pricing, right.
So on the service creation front, cloud and virtualization is enabling service creation, infrastructure as a service or platform as a service. There is microservices where you develop applications in small, isolated containers. So that is a big trend that is driving the service creation, and of course, open source. Service providers are adopting open source like never before.
Yeah, it's interesting because open source is one where we talked about, but they have to be able to customize some added value to differentiate themselves, right?
That is correct. And open source is very useful because it gives them development scale, because they are not going to be able to deliver all of those and develop all of those in-house.
Right.
And it also, they should participate in open source community because they can drive the product roadmap for open source. So that actually helps them in the service creation side.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense.
On the service delivery side, there is, of course, you need to have analytics because you are not only delivering the service and deploying them, but also monitoring them. So big data and analytics and those things become really important. Automation. And it's not just about device level automation, it's system level automation and policy abstractions and all of that things. There's also security, big trend, but it's very important when you are talking about deploying actual services, right? And then, of course, the pricing model also involves a little bit of big data and the ability to be able to look at an infrastructure and figure out how can I price it on an on-demand basis. So a lot of big data and analytics is very important there.
No, this is good because you really framed it into a few different areas, which is kind of nice because there's just too much talk purely on the technology piece and not enough alignment in guiding the service provider to those different components there. Now, if we could try to make this a little bit more real, right? What are the prevalent use cases that you see that are driving this market, at least from Juniper's point of view?
Correct. So on the service, so for the service providers, Of course, Juniper caters to a wide variety of customers. There's service providers, enterprises, and cloud service. Specifically on the service providers, the biggest use case probably will be network functions virtualization and service chaining.
Okay.
And we are talking about not only chaining services like firewall, load balancer, DPI, WAN optimization, network and security services of that nature, but we are also talking about chaining, mobility applications like, SGSN, MME, P gateway, S gateway, all of that. The other thing about service chaining is also, and a lot of people do not realize that, is there is a large install base of physical network functions. So you actually have to, you cannot rip and replace all of that. So you have to integrate that with your virtualized network functions. So physical network functions and virtualized network functions providing a hybrid kind of a service chain. So service chaining is one of the most important use cases. The other is, of course, the cloud use case. Cloud has got lots of different kinds of varieties. So you've got the telco cloud where you run all these virtualized mobility applications. You've got IoT cloud where you've run a lot of applications to which all these connected devices are talking to. You've got public cloud, which is a lot of service providers offer infrastructure as a service and bare metal as a service, big use case.
Big use case.
And of course, private cloud and hybrid cloud environments for their own internal IT, so IT as a service. So those are two big use cases. But then the other thing also is what industry calls as software-defined WAN.
SD-WAN or something like that.
Exactly. So what you do is essentially you automate the introduction of branch office or remote office into the infrastructure in a very automated fashion. And you can connect that branch office to your data center or POP or C or what have you.
Now, are there any real deployments that you're able to elaborate on or talk about?
Sure. So we have on the service provider side, we have got large customers who are, many of them are very close to putting their workloads in production, putting their environment in production. Some of them are already in production. So the large service providers like AT&T, you've got NTT, Orange, these are the ones that we have publicly announced. There are a lot of other service providers and cloud providers who we have not yet announced, but we will probably do that.
That's great. So they're moving past the POCs to actual deployments.
Exactly. If I would say 2015 was more on the POC side, 2016 is when they are moving into real deployments.
That's actually good to see there's some real deployments with that. Now, there seems to be a disconnect. I mean, when we look at organizational transformation, and this new software-centric or new cloud model. I mean, what do you see the requirements for the two to better align better?
You actually bring a very important point about organizational changes, and essentially the service providers are adopting a lot of DevOps kind of an approach where you have to have compressed release cycles. You can no longer just keep running your environment and wait till it fails. You have to have frequent upgrades. You have to have a CI/CD or continuous integration, continuous deployment kind of an environment laid out. So all of that requires new skill sets. So you need to hire proper, people who understand cloud, people who are in the open source community, who are able to contribute stuff to the open source community, people who understand systems. So all people who are DevOps in nature. So you need to have that kind of an organizational transformation. That is very important for
it's a good point, because it's like the culture needs to change as well.
Exactly.
You could bring all this technology, but the culture of the organization is a good point. Now, it's interesting, there's a lot of service providers, that have started. You talked about some deployments, real deployments, but what would you recommend to those that haven't started the journey yet? I mean, where should they get started, would you recommend?
I think first of all, they have to identify the core business values that they want to offer to their own end customers. That will drive the use cases that they want to implement. Once they have identified the use cases, it's all about execution. So they have to figure out a realistic rollout plan, which is aggressive but realistic, and it involves all the parties involved, whether you're talking about SDN vendors, OpenStack vendors, server vendors, professional services, system integrators, and so on. And you have to involve them in the whole rollout process. Then once you have done that, you actually roll it out in incremental fashion.
Right.
Don't roll it out all at once.
Right.
You roll out some and then have a fast fail approach. If things are not working out, you
Yeah.
should pivot to the appropriate direction. And the most important thing is use open source as much as possible,
Okay.
because that's the only way you can get development scale, as well as you can have drive the roadmap, product roadmap for the open source products.
Great, excellent. Well, you're officially off the hot seat. Thank you.
Thank you.
With Pratik, this is Ray Mota. Thanks for joining this edition of the Hot Seat.